The champagne had been flowing for hours when he walked up to that microphone. Tyler Brennan, standing there in his rented tuxedo, flashing that same cocky grin he'd worn in every divorce hearing, every social media post, every interview where he'd painted himself as the victim. The room was packed with Chicago's elite. Politicians, CEOs, old money and new money mixing under crystal chandeliers. And Tyler was about to give a speech thanking everyone for their donations to the Children's Medical Research Foundation, a charity his company had sponsored. He'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks. This was his comeback, his redemption arc, the night he'd proved to everyone that he was still somebody. But in exactly 12 minutes, everything he thought he knew about his ex-wife, about his life, about who held the cards in this game, was going to shatter. And the woman responsible? She hadn't even arrived yet. This is the story of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, a divorce that turned into a public execution, and one night that revealed a truth so devastating, so perfectly timed, that it left a ballroom full of powerful people in complete silence. 3 questions will shape everything you're about to hear. Who was Vanessa Cole before Tyler Brennan decided to destroy her reputation? What did she do in the 18 months after he told the world she was worthless? And who was the man she walked in with that night? The man whose presence alone made Tyler's face drain of every drop of color. Stay close, because what happened at that fundraiser wasn't just revenge. It was something far more calculated, far more permanent, and far more devastating than anything Tyler could have imagined. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's rewind to where this really started. Boston, Massachusetts. 6 years ago, Vanessa Cole was 31 years old, working as a financial analyst at a private equity firm called Redstone Capital. She wasn't flashy, didn't network at cocktail parties or post about her wins on LinkedIn. But the people who mattered knew her name. She had a gift for seeing value where others saw risk. She'd identified 3 acquisitions in 2 years that had returned over 200% to investors. Her boss called her a quiet assassin, the kind of person who did the work, made the money, and never needed applause. Outside the office, Vanessa was private to the point of mystery. She had a small circle of close friends. No social media presence. She preferred jazz clubs to nightclubs, books to parties, and solitude to small talk. She'd been hurt before, a relationship in her 20s that had ended badly. Since then, she'd built walls. High ones. Tyler Brennan crashed through those walls like he crashed through everything else. Loud, confident, relentless. He was a marketing executive at a tech startup that was trying to disrupt the healthcare industry. All pitch, all performance, all charm. They met at a networking event Vanessa hadn't even wanted to attend. Her colleague had dragged her there. Tyler spotted her across the room, standing alone near the bar, and made it his mission to get her attention. He walked up, introduced himself, made a joke about how boring these events were, and somehow got her laughing. That was Tyler's gift. He could make you feel like the only person in the room, like he saw something in you that nobody else did. Vanessa, who'd spent years keeping people at arm's length, let him in. They dated for 8 months before he proposed. It was fast, maybe too fast, but Tyler had a way of making everything feel urgent, like if you didn't say yes right now you'd miss the opportunity of a lifetime. They got married in the fall of 2019, small ceremony in Nantucket. 50 guests. Vanessa wore a lace dress she'd found in a vintage shop. Tyler cried during his vows. His family loved her. Her family had reservations about how quickly it was all moving, but they kept quiet. For the first year, it was good. They bought a brownstone in Beacon Hill. Vanessa kept climbing at Redstone. Tyler's startup got acquired by a larger firm, and he landed a senior role in their marketing department. They looked like they were building something real. But here's what nobody tells you about marrying someone like Tyler Brennan. The charm that pulls you in is the same charm that destroys you. Because Tyler needed attention the way most people need oxygen. And when Vanessa's career started demanding more of her time, when she started traveling for deals, when she started getting recognition that didn't include him, Tyler's insecurity revealed itself. It started with comments. Little digs disguised as jokes. At a dinner party with friends, he'd say things like, "Yeah, Vanessa's crushing it at work. I barely see her anymore. But hey, someone's got to pay the bills," and everyone would laugh uncomfortably. Vanessa would smile and change the subject, but inside, she was taking notes. The resentment was growing. Tyler wanted a wife who orbited around him, who made him the center of her universe, who celebrated his wins louder than her own. Vanessa wasn't built that way. The marriage started cracking in early 2022. They fought more. Vanessa would come home exhausted from a closing that had taken 3 months to finalize, and instead of support, she'd get passive-aggressive silence. Tyler stopped asking about her work, stopped pretending to care. He started going out more without her, coming home late, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. Vanessa wasn't stupid. She knew what was happening, but she was also tired. Tired of fighting for a marriage that only seemed to work when she made herself smaller. So when she found the text messages on his phone in June 2022, she wasn't even surprised. The woman's name was Erica, 26, social media manager at Tyler's company. The texts were explicit. Months of them. Plans to meet up. Hotels. Lies he'd told Vanessa to cover his tracks. Vanessa confronted him that night. Tyler didn't apologize. He blamed her. Said she'd been emotionally absent. Said Erica made him feel appreciated. Said if Vanessa had been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. Vanessa filed for divorce the next week. Clean break. She moved out. Rented an apartment in Cambridge. Hired a lawyer. Told Tyler she wanted this done quietly, maturely, without drama. Tyler agreed. Or at least, he said he did. But the moment those papers were filed, Tyler Brennan did what men like him always do when they lose control. He went on the offensive. He started telling anyone who would listen that Vanessa had destroyed their marriage. That she'd been cold, distant, obsessed with work. That he'd tried everything to save it, but she'd given up. He posted on social media. Vague at first. Sometimes you realize you've been fighting for someone who stopped fighting for you. Then more direct. Photos with Erica. Captions like, finally know what it feels like to be with someone who actually cares. He went on a podcast. Local Boston show, decent following. Spent 40 minutes talking about how his ex-wife had prioritized her career over their relationship, how he'd felt like a ghost in his own home, how he'd found real love with someone who valued him. The internet ate it up. Tyler was good at playing the victim. He had the charm, the story, the wounded but hopeful for the future narrative that people love. Vanessa became the villain by default. Cold corporate woman who cared more about deals than her husband. Forums picked it up. Reddit threads. Twitter arguments. People who'd never met Vanessa decided they hated her. Someone even made a meme. Vanessa's LinkedIn photo with the caption, "When your marriage dies because you only love spreadsheets." It got thousands of shares. Vanessa saw all of it. She didn't respond. Didn't defend herself. Didn't post a single thing. She just disappeared. Deleted Instagram. Made her LinkedIn private. Stopped going to industry events where she knew people would ask. Her friends begged her to tell her side. Her lawyer suggested making a statement. Vanessa said no. She had other plans. The divorce was finalized in December 2022. The settlement was a disaster. Vanessa had been the higher earner, but Tyler's lawyers found every loophole. He got the brownstone. He got half her retirement accounts. He walked away with enough to live comfortably for years without working. Vanessa signed everything without a fight. Her lawyer thought she was insane. But Vanessa wasn't interested in fighting over furniture and bank accounts. She was playing a different game. A longer one. 3 days after the divorce was finalized, Vanessa did something nobody expected. She quit her job at Redstone Capital. Just walked into her boss's office, handed in her resignation, and left. No explanation. No next job lined up. People in the Boston finance world were stunned. Vanessa Cole, one of the sharpest analysts in private equity, just disappeared. Tyler saw the news through mutual contacts. He laughed, told people she'd probably had a breakdown, that the divorce had broken her, that she couldn't handle losing him. He posted about it, subtly. Some people crumble under pressure. Glad I'm not one of them. But Vanessa wasn't crumbling. She was in Los Angeles, and she was meeting with a man named Julian Cross. If you don't know that name, you're not alone. Julian Cross doesn't do interviews, doesn't show up on Forbes lists, doesn't attend galas or cut ribbons. But in certain circles, in rooms where real power lives, Julian Cross is a legend. He's the founder and CEO of Cross Ventures, a private investment firm that's launched over 30 companies in the last 15 years. Tech, real estate, green energy, healthcare. Julian had a reputation for finding brilliant people, giving them resources, and staying out of their way. He was 48 years old, never married, famously private. and worth an estimated $3.2 billion. Vanessa had met Julian once, years earlier, at a conference panel. They'd talked for maybe 10 minutes about risk assessment strategies. She remembered him as sharp, quiet, the kind of person who asked better questions than he answered. She hadn't thought about him again until 6 months into her divorce, when she'd started planning what came next. Vanessa had an idea, a big one. A private equity fund focused exclusively on women-led startups and industries where women were systematically underfunded. She had the experience, the track record, the vision. What she didn't have was capital. So she reached out to Julian Cross. Sent him a cold email. Didn't expect a response. He replied in 4 hours. They met in person 2 weeks later. Vanessa pitched him for 90 minutes. Showed him the data, the market gap, the returns potential. Julian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked one question. Why you? Vanessa looked him in the eye. Because I've spent the last 6 years watching men take credit for my work, underestimate my capabilities, and assume I'd stay quiet. I'm done staying quiet. Julian smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. When can you start? He wrote her a check for $50 million. Seed funding for a new firm. That meeting changed everything. Vanessa moved to Los Angeles in January 2023. She found a small office space in Santa Monica, nothing fancy, just enough room for her and a small team. She hired carefully. 3 analysts, all women, all overlooked by traditional firms despite brilliant track records. She hired a CFO who'd been pushed out of her last role for being too aggressive in negotiations. Vanessa built a team of people who'd been told they weren't enough, and together, they set out to prove the world wrong. The first 3 months were grueling. Vanessa worked 18-hour days. She met with over 60 female founders, looking for companies that had been passed over by traditional venture capital. She found a biotech startup run by a woman who'd developed a breakthrough in early cancer detection. Traditional VCs had told her the market was too niche. Vanessa invested $3 million. She found a logistics company founded by 2 women who'd figured out how to cut shipping costs by 30% using AI optimization. They'd been laughed out of pitch meetings for being in a male-dominated industry. Vanessa invested $2 million. She found a sustainable fashion brand that had generated $5 million in revenue with 0 outside funding. Male investors had told the founder that fashion was oversaturated. Vanessa invested $4 million. By June 2023, Cole Capital Partners had invested in 8 companies. Vanessa didn't announce her deals, didn't do press releases. She just worked. But the founders she backed started talking. Word spread in women's entrepreneurship circles. There was a new fund, run by a woman, backed by serious money, actually taking women seriously. Applications flooded in. Vanessa reviewed every single one. She traveled constantly. San Francisco, Austin, New York, Seattle, meeting founders, assessing businesses, making decisions that traditional finance said were risky. But Vanessa had built her career on seeing value where others saw risk. And she was right more often than she was wrong. By December 2023, 3 of Cole Capital's portfolio companies had doubled their valuations. The biotech startup secured FDA approval for clinical trials. The logistics company landed a contract with a major retailer. The fashion brand expanded into Europe. Vanessa's fund was generating returns that made traditional VCs look foolish for passing on these companies. Industry publications started paying attention. Forbes mentioned Cole Capital in an article about emerging funds. TechCrunch covered one of their portfolio companies and mentioned Vanessa as the lead investor. But Vanessa still didn't do interviews, didn't attend conferences, let the work speak for itself. And somewhere during all of this, something shifted between Vanessa and Julian. It started professionally. He'd check in on the fund's progress. They'd have dinner meetings that turned into 3-hour conversations about strategy, about market trends, about life. Julian had spent 2 decades building companies. He understood the sacrifices, the loneliness, the weight of carrying other people's dreams. He and Vanessa spoke the same language. But there was something else, a respect that went deeper than business. Julian saw Vanessa's ambition not as something to manage or contain, but as something to admire. He never asked her to explain herself, never questioned her judgment, never made her success about him. And Vanessa, who'd spent years with a man who needed her to be smaller so he could feel bigger, found something revolutionary in Julian's presence. Room to be exactly who she was. Their first non-business dinner happened in April 2024. Julian invited her to a restaurant in Malibu. They talked for 4 hours. About their childhoods, their failures, the relationships that had shaped them. Julian had been engaged once, in his 30s, to a woman who'd wanted him to choose between her and his company. He'd chosen the company, regretted it for years, realized later that the real issue wasn't the choice, but that she'd made him feel like his ambition was a character flaw. Vanessa told him about Tyler, about the podcast, the memes, the public humiliation, about how she'd almost let it break her, almost believed she was the person Tyler had described. Julian listened without judgment. When she finished, he said something she'd never forget. The people who try to make you smaller are just revealing their own limitations. You didn't get smaller. You got free. They started seeing each other outside of work. Quietly. No announcements. No social media posts. Vanessa had learned that lesson the hard way. But people in their circle noticed. The way Julian looked at Vanessa when she spoke. The way she smiled at him in meetings. The way they moved through rooms together, comfortable, equal, unbothered by the attention. By summer 2024, Cole Capital had invested in 15 companies. 5 had gone public. The fund's returns were astronomical. Vanessa was being called one of the sharpest investors in venture capital. And Julian Cross, the man who'd backed her when nobody else would, was now the man who stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her, as an equal. Meanwhile, Tyler Brennan's life was unraveling in slow motion. His relationship with Erica, the woman he'd left his marriage for, started falling apart within months of the divorce being finalized. Erica was young, ambitious, excited about the relationship at first, but she quickly realized that Tyler was more interested in performing the relationship than actually being in it. He posted about them constantly. Every date, every moment. Erica would ask him to put his phone down, to just be present, and Tyler would get defensive. He needed the validation. Needed people to see that he was happy, that he'd moved on, that he'd won. But Erica wasn't a prop. By summer 2023, she was done. She broke up with him over text. Told him she was tired of being his Instagram content. Tyler was devastated. Not because he'd lost her, but because the breakup made him look bad. People had been following their relationship online. Now he'd have to explain why it failed. He tried to spin it. Posted vague things about how they'd grown apart. How sometimes timing isn't right. How he was focusing on himself. But Erica wasn't staying quiet. She posted her own message. Short. Direct. I stayed longer than I should have with someone who cared more about appearances than authenticity. Lesson learned. People connected the dots. The same forums that had celebrated Tyler's new relationship started mocking him. Guess he wasn't that great after all. Tyler deleted the posts about Erica. Tried to move on. But the damage was done. His career wasn't faring better. The company he worked for started struggling in late 2023. Budget cuts. Layoffs. Tyler's department was hit hard. His role was eliminated in January 2024. They offered him a lower position with a significant pay cut. Tyler took it because he had no other options. But he resented every moment. He'd gone from a senior marketing role to managing social media accounts for a company that was barely staying afloat. His colleagues, younger and hungrier, outworked him. Tyler started showing up late, missing deadlines, blaming others when campaigns failed. By June 2024, he was let go entirely. The official reason was performance issues. The real reason, according to people who worked with him, was that Tyler had become impossible to work with. Bitter, defensive, always the victim. Tyler moved out of his apartment in Beacon Hill. Couldn't afford it anymore. Found a smaller place in Brookline. Started doing freelance consulting work. A few small clients here and there. Nothing substantial. His savings from the divorce settlement were running out. He'd spent too much trying to maintain appearances, trying to prove to everyone that he was fine, that he was thriving. But he wasn't. He was barely surviving. And the loneliness was suffocating. Tyler would scroll through social media late at night, searching for Vanessa's name, hoping to find proof that she was struggling too. But there was nothing. She'd disappeared completely. No LinkedIn, no Instagram, no trace. And that silence, that complete absence, ate at him more than any insult could have. Tyler started drinking more. Not enough to call it a problem, but enough that he noticed. Enough that his friends noticed. He'd meet them for drinks and spend the entire night complaining. About Vanessa. About his job. About how unfair everything was. His friends stopped inviting him out. They were tired of the negativity, tired of hearing the same stories, tired of watching Tyler refuse to take responsibility for anything. By fall 2024, Tyler was isolated, broke, and desperately trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had completely fallen apart. And that's when the invitation arrived. October 2024. Tyler checked his mail and found a heavy envelope. Thick cardstock, gold lettering. The Children's Medical Research Foundation Annual Fundraiser. Black tie, November 9th. The Drake Hotel in Chicago. Tyler stared at the invitation, confused at first. He hadn't been involved with the foundation in years. But then he saw the note at the bottom. A former colleague, someone from his old company, had added Tyler as his +1. Probably out of pity. But Tyler didn't care about the reason. He saw opportunity. This was a major event. Important people. A chance to network, to remind the world he still existed, to maybe, just maybe, find a way back to relevance. Tyler RSVP'd within an hour. He spent the next 3 weeks preparing. He didn't have money for a new tuxedo, so he rented one. Booked the cheapest hotel room he could find near the venue. Started crafting social media posts about the event, trying to make it sound like he'd been personally invited by the foundation's board. The posts barely got any engagement, but Tyler didn't notice. He was too focused on what this night could mean. A comeback. A reminder that Tyler Brennan still mattered. He found a date on a dating app 2 weeks before the event. A woman named Kelly. She seemed nice enough. Worked in marketing. Didn't know anything about Tyler's past. Perfect. The night of the fundraiser, November 9th, 2024, Tyler arrived at the Drake Hotel at 7 p.m. The ballroom was even more impressive than he'd imagined. Massive chandeliers. Tables set for 400 guests. A stage with a screen and podium at the front. Waiters in tuxedos circulating with champagne and appetizers. Tyler felt a rush of nostalgia. This was his world. Or at least, it used to be. He grabbed a champagne flute and started working the room. Shaking hands. Introducing himself. Trying to connect with anyone who looked important. Most people were polite but distant. They'd smile, exchange pleasantries, then move on. Tyler kept pushing, laughing too loud at jokes, telling stories about his past successes, trying to convince himself as much as others that he belonged there. Kelly, his date, stayed close at first but quickly grew uncomfortable. Tyler was so focused on networking that he barely acknowledged her. She sipped her champagne and checked her phone, wondering how long she'd have to stay before it would be polite to leave. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was full. Tyler found a seat at a table near the back. Not ideal, but he told himself it was fine. He'd mingle more after dinner. Make connections. Maybe even get some business leads. The program started at 8:15. Speeches about the foundation's work. Video presentations showing the children they'd helped. Tyler barely paid attention. He was scrolling through Instagram, checking to see if anyone had liked his posts about being at the event. Then the foundation's president walked to the microphone. She was a woman in her 60s, elegant, well-spoken. She thanked everyone for coming, talked about the impact their donations were making, and then said something that made Tyler look up from his phone. Before we continue, I want to recognize some very special guests tonight. We're honored to have Julian Cross here with us this evening. Julian's foundation has been one of our most generous supporters. Over the past 3 years, his contributions have funded breakthrough research in pediatric oncology. Julian, would you please stand? The room erupted in applause. Tyler looked up. Across the ballroom, near the front, a man stood. Tall, late 40s, impeccably tailored charcoal suit, salt and pepper hair. Tyler didn't recognize the name, but everyone else clearly did. People were standing, clapping. Tyler glanced at Kelly. Who is that? Kelly shrugged. The president continued. And joining Julian tonight is Vanessa Cole, founder of Cole Capital Partners. Vanessa has committed to matching Julian's donation this year, which brings our total to $12 million for childhood cancer research. Vanessa, thank you for your incredible generosity. Tyler's world stopped. The champagne glass in his hand tilted, nearly spilling. Because standing next to Julian Cross, now rising from her seat to acknowledge the applause, was Vanessa, his ex-wife. But not the Vanessa he remembered. This woman looked transformed. She was wearing a black evening gown that was elegant and understated, but clearly expensive. Her hair was different, longer, styled in soft waves. Diamond earrings caught the light. She looked confident, powerful, like she belonged in that room. like she owned it. And standing next to her, with his hand resting gently on her back, was Julian Cross. Billionaire. The kind of man Tyler couldn't compete with even on his best day. Tyler couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. Kelly leaned over, whispering, "Are you okay? You look pale." Tyler didn't answer. He was watching Vanessa and Julian sit back down. Watching Julian lean toward her and whisper something that made her smile. Watching her touch his arm, comfortable, familiar. The president kept talking, but Tyler heard none of it. His mind was racing. Vanessa was here, with Julian Cross, looking like that, being celebrated like that, donating millions. Everything Tyler had said about her, every lie he'd told, every time he'd claimed she'd never amount to anything without him, was crumbling in real time. The speeches continued. A researcher took the stage and talked about how the foundation's funding had led to a new treatment protocol. A mother shared a tearful story about her daughter's recovery. Tyler sat frozen, his eyes locked on the back of Vanessa's head. She was 3 tables away, close enough that he could see her clearly, but far enough that she hadn't noticed him. Or maybe she had noticed and just didn't care. That thought made Tyler's stomach turn. Kelly excused herself to the restroom. Tyler barely noticed. He was trapped in his own head, replaying every moment of their marriage, every choice he'd made, every word he'd said about her after the divorce. At one point, Vanessa turned slightly to talk to someone at her table, and for just a second, her eyes swept across the room. Tyler held his breath, waiting to see if she'd spot him. Their eyes met, just for a fraction of a second. Vanessa's expression didn't change. No shock, no anger, no satisfaction, just a brief, calm acknowledgement of his existence. And then she turned back to her conversation. That look, that complete indifference, shattered something in Tyler, because it confirmed what he'd been terrified of since the divorce. He didn't matter to her. Not anymore. Maybe he never really had. He'd been a chapter she'd closed, and she'd moved on to writing a completely different story. After the formal program ended, the lights came up slightly, and people began mingling. Tyler watched from his table as a crowd formed around Vanessa and Julian. CEOs, board members, people Tyler recognized from business magazines. Everyone wanted a moment with them. Vanessa moved through the conversations with ease, shaking hands, smiling, speaking with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Julian stayed close, protective without being possessive. His hand would occasionally rest on Vanessa's lower back. She'd glance at him, share a private smile, and continue the conversation. They moved like a unit, like 2 people who understood each other completely. Tyler couldn't look away. A photographer approached Vanessa and Julian, asking for a picture for the foundation's website. They posed together, Julian's arm around Vanessa's waist. Both of them smiling. Not the forced smiles of people performing for cameras, but genuine warmth. The photographer thanked them and moved on. That photo would be on the foundation's homepage by morning, shared across social media, picked up by business publications. Vanessa Cole and Julian Cross. Power couple. Philanthropists. Winners. Tyler stood up. He couldn't stay in that room anymore. Couldn't watch this. Couldn't breathe. Kelly had returned from the restroom, taken one look at his face, and quietly gathered her things. "I'm going to head out," she said. Tyler nodded. Didn't try to stop her. Didn't apologize. She left. Tyler walked toward the exit, weaving through tables, past groups of people still celebrating the evening's success. He heard fragments of conversations. "Did you see how much they donated? Julian Cross doesn't come to these things often. Vanessa Cole is brilliant. Have you read about her fund?" Tyler pushed through the doors and found himself in the hotel lobby. Quiet. Cold marble. He stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then he walked out into the November Chicago night. The wind hit him immediately. Sharp. Freezing. He walked 3 blocks back to his hotel. A budget chain. Nothing like the Drake. Got to his room. Sat on the edge of the bed, still in his rented tuxedo. And for the first time in 2 years, Tyler Brennan understood what he'd lost. Not just Vanessa. Not just the marriage. But the version of himself that could have been worthy of her. He'd chosen ego over partnership. He'd needed to be the star, and when Vanessa started outshining him, instead of celebrating her, instead of supporting her, he'd tried to dim her light. He'd blamed her for his insecurities, cheated on her, publicly humiliated her, convinced himself she was the problem. And now she was standing in ballrooms with billionaires, donating millions to charity, building empires, while he was sitting in a $60 hotel room wearing a rented tuxedo, wondering how his life had fallen apart so completely. Tyler pulled out his phone, opened Instagram. The first post on his feed was from the foundation, a photo of Vanessa and Julian. The caption read, "We're honored to celebrate our incredible supporters Julian Cross and Vanessa Cole, whose combined $12 million donation will change lives." The post had thousands of likes already, hundreds of comments. Power couple. Incredible generosity. We need more people like this in the world. Tyler scrolled through the comments, masochistically, looking for someone, anyone, who might say something negative. But there was nothing. Just praise, admiration, respect. He clicked on Vanessa's name, but her profile was still private. No posts, no information, just her name and a blank page. She'd kept it that way since the divorce. Tyler opened Twitter, searched her name, found dozens of posts from people at the fundraiser. Photos of her and Julian. Quotes from her speech that Tyler hadn't even heard because he'd been too focused on his phone. One tweet read, "Vanessa Cole just pledged $6 million to cancer research and gave the most gracious speech about using success to lift others." Meanwhile, her ex-husband went on a podcast 2 years ago and called her cold and career-obsessed. Who's winning now? Tyler felt sick. He threw his phone on the bed, stood up, paced the small room. His reflection in the mirror stopped him. He looked exhausted, older than his 38 years. The tuxedo that was supposed to make him look successful just made him look like he was trying too hard. He sat back down, put his head in his hands, and for the first time since the divorce, Tyler let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. He'd destroyed a good woman's reputation because he couldn't handle her success. He'd cheated on her and then blamed her for it. He'd taken a private pain and weaponized it publicly. And why? Because it made him feel powerful. Because it gave him control when he felt like he was losing it. Because he needed the world to see him as the victim instead of the villain. The story hit the internet by morning. Photos of Vanessa and Julian at the fundraiser were everywhere. Business publications ran articles about their donation. Someone found Tyler's old podcast interview where he'd called Vanessa emotionally unavailable and career-obsessed. They posted it side by side with clips from the fundraiser. The contrast was devastating. Tyler, bitter and blame-shifting, versus Vanessa, poised and generous. The memes started immediately. Screenshots of Tyler's old Instagram posts with captions like, "How it started," next to photos of Vanessa and Julian with captions like, "How it's going." Reddit threads that had once vilified Vanessa were now celebrating her comeback. "This is the most satisfying glow-up I've ever seen. Imagine mocking your ex-wife, and then she shows up with a billionaire." Tyler Brennan is somewhere crying into his rented tuxedo. Tyler's Instagram was flooded with comments. Brutal, mocking, unforgiving. "This you?" with screenshots of his old posts about Vanessa. "How's that podcast interview aging? Looks like she did just fine without you." Tyler read every single comment. Couldn't stop himself. Each one was a knife. By noon, he'd deleted the app. By evening, he'd deleted all his social media accounts. But it didn't matter. The story had already spread beyond his control. Tyler Brennan, the man who'd publicly destroyed his ex-wife's reputation, had been humiliated in the most public way possible. And the worst part? Vanessa hadn't said a word, hadn't acknowledged him, hadn't even needed to. Her success spoke for itself. Vanessa never commented on any of it, never acknowledged Tyler's presence at the fundraiser, never responded to the media attention. She and Julian continued their work. Cole Capital kept growing. They attended more events together. Always poised. Always focused on the work, not the attention. Industry publications started referring to them as one of the most influential couples in venture capital. But Vanessa and Julian didn't define themselves by their relationship. They were partners in the truest sense. Two people who'd found in each other what they'd never found anywhere else. Respect. Equality. Room to be completely themselves. 6 months after the fundraiser, Vanessa gave one interview. Just one. A podcast about women in finance. The host asked if she'd faced obstacles rebuilding after her divorce. Vanessa paused before answering. "I stopped waiting for permission to take up space. I stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. And I surrounded myself with people who saw my ambition as an asset, not a threat. That changed everything." The host asked if she had advice for women going through similar situations. Vanessa's answer was simple. Don't waste energy on revenge. Don't waste time trying to prove people wrong. Just build something so undeniable they have no choice but to watch. And then keep building. The host pressed. Do you ever think about the people who doubted you? Vanessa smiled. Not anymore. Tyler moved to Austin in March 2025. Took a mid-level marketing job at an agency. Kept his head down. No social media. No podcasts. No public presence. He rented a small apartment. Lived quietly. Tried to rebuild something resembling a life. He thought about Vanessa sometimes. Late at night. Wondered if she ever thought about him. But he knew the answer. She didn't. She'd moved on the moment she signed those divorce papers. Everything that came after, the success, the transformation, the relationship with Julian, none of it was about Tyler. It was about Vanessa refusing to let his version of her become the truth. And that was the cruelest part. Tyler had spent 2 years trying to destroy her, and she'd rebuilt herself into something so far beyond his reach that his attacks had become irrelevant. She hadn't beaten him. She'd simply stopped playing his game. And in doing so, she'd won everything. So here's what I want you to think about. Was what happened at that fundraiser revenge? Or was it just Vanessa living her life, and Tyler happening to witness it? Because there's a real difference. Revenge requires the other person to matter. It requires you to shape your choices around hurting them. But what Vanessa did was different. She didn't rebuild her life to hurt Tyler. She rebuilt it because she refused to let his narrative define her worth. And when Tyler saw her that night, when he saw what she'd become, when he saw her standing next to a man who valued everything Tyler had tried to diminish, the devastation he felt wasn't something Vanessa inflicted. It was something he'd earned by underestimating her, by tearing her down, by assuming she'd stay broken. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Vanessa knew Tyler would be there? Do you think walking in with Julian was calculated? Or do you think it was just fate putting them in the same room at the exact moment that would hurt him most? And what would you have done in her position? Would you have confronted him? Ignored him? Or would you have done exactly what Vanessa did, which was to live so well that his presence became irrelevant? Hit that subscribe button because we've got more stories like this coming. Stories about people who got written off and came back stronger than anyone imagined. Stories about justice that doesn't come from courts, but from refusing to stay down. Thanks for watching. And remember, the best revenge isn't hurting the person who hurt you. It's becoming someone they could never touch.